Good morning, everyone, and welcome to class. Thank you all for joining the class on youth and children's ministry. But in the last few classes and few more going forward this month, we will be studying on children's ministry. After that, Pastor Sam Matthews will, take the course on youth ministry after that. Okay, so now we're doing children's ministry. Okay, after that, Pastor Sam Matthews would take the classes on youth ministry. So we looked at the biblical basis and the mandate for children's ministry. After that, we looked at the developmental needs common throughout all age groups. After which we looked at the developmental needs of children in specific age groups. So how and why did we look at all of these developmental needs? Why did we look at the developmental needs common across all age group for children? And why did we look at the developmental needs of specific age groups? Why? Okay, you can understand them.
Sister, because they differ according to their age.
Yes. So why did we study, the needs based on the different ages?
So
The
we can help
foundation
them.
for the
1 minute, Lucy. Gertrude, yes, you can go ahead and then we'll hear
So we
Lucy.
can help them in their needs in whatever we can.
Okay, you can help them in their needs. Okay, can minister to them effectively. Yes, Lucy?
same points is said to minister in the children ministry effectively
Okay.
and serving the kids, having the background about the child when we are dealing with the different standards the child growing in.
Okay.
Every age group for kids they feel different.
Hmm.
For every age group kids they feel different.
Okay.
So what they thought in that particular time and how their memory works,
Okay.
like how we learn concrete learning and all. So it
Okay.
helps in with the different age groups. So
Okay.
we can divide
Okay. You can divide them
where we need to put whom.
where you need to put where, whom, and also preparing the lesson plan, right? Teaching them. Teaching is very, very important. So when you're teaching them, what is the what narrative, what story, how to present the content, what to do, what are the activities that you do, all of those things are very, very important. Okay, now we'll move on to the learning styles. Okay, uh, now we all learn differently, we all receive information differently, different people receive information, recollect information very differently. So we look at learning through our five senses. So what is your five senses? Seeing,
Hearing,
hearing, smelling,
smelling, yes.
tasting, and touch. Yes. So our five senses, are primary means by which information enters the brain. So it's through your five senses that information is entering through your brain. Now, how is information entering to your brain now? Through which sense? Hearing. Okay, because you're not seeing, you don't have the notes, but if you're looking at the screen, you have the PowerPoint, so it's also seeing. Okay, now the most basic technique for effective teaching is using teaching methods that incorporate all five senses. So if you want to be a good teacher, a good minister, and minister effectively to children or to any age group, it's the basic technique or the effective teaching method is to use or incorporate all the five senses. You might be wondering, how can we incorporate smell and taste, right, into teaching people? But we will look at that. Okay, so use as many of the five senses that you can get the most out of your lesson or your teaching activity. So the more senses that you use, the more effective your teaching becomes. And the also more information is kept in the, people can recollect or store up that information in the brain. So use as many of the five senses as you can to get most out of the lesson or the teaching activity. Whether you're doing an activity, also use the five senses. When you're teaching a lesson, use the five senses. Even when you're preaching, you can still use the five senses. Okay. So when learning activities appeal to two or more senses, more learning happens. So when you use, now for example, now we are using hearing and also seeing. If you're looking at the PowerPoints, there's learning and hearing and seeing happening. Or if you're using any other senses, so when you use more, two or more senses, more learning happens. Now when you use multiple senses, what happens? You reduce boredom. Okay, that means if children are getting bored in your class, you're just getting them to sit down and listen to you, they'll get bored. But if you're using pictures, you're using PowerPoints, you're using movies, you're getting them to do some activity with their hand, you're getting them to smell things, taste things, then you're actually reducing boredom. Children will not get bored in your class. And also when you use multiple senses, you will not have to deal with more behavioral problems of the children. Okay. Now, if you are not using those multiple senses, children will start, when they get bored, they'll pinch each other, fight with each other, they'll be running around, they'll be dreaming, they will be sleeping, and then you'll have to, deal with behavioral problems. But if you use multiple senses, you reduce behavioral problems. Now, smelling and tasting activities can be the most effective in learning. Did you know that? Smell and tasting activities can be the most effective in learning, but are they used more often in learning? No, they are the least used. Okay. So learning activities that allows children to say or do something also results in the greatest ability to recall and demonstrate what they have learned. So not only teaching them, and they hearing, but also getting them to, recall by giving them. How do you get children to recall what you have taught them? What are some of the activities you can do to get children to know or get children to recall what you have taught them?
If we have told them any story last time, we can just ask them to act.
Okay, enact it. Okay. How else can you get them to recall? When you teach something to somebody, how do you get them to recall?
By asking question.
Yes, basic. Simple as that. You can get them to ask some questions. What else?
By activities to
Active. Yes.
dramatize or to put it through singing.
Yes, scripture and song, memory verse and song. Yes, sing it also. What else?
By giving them hints.
Giving them hints. Okay. Giving them opportunities to say what, Vimal?
We can give them opportunities that you go and share what you have learned.
Okay. Application. Okay. Getting them to listening from them how they have applied. Also debates, right? Discussion. Giving them case scenarios, telling them, okay, this person did this. What do you think the person should have done or shouldn't have done? Okay. So all of those things can also be good ways to help children recall and also demonstrate what they have learned. Now, did Jesus use the five senses when he was preaching and teaching? Yes. Did he use multi-sensory techniques? Yes. So give me some examples how Jesus used the senses to teach. The five senses to teach.
after sharing the parables, he used to say, "Those who have ears,
Hmm.
uh,
Let him hear. Okay. When he was teaching the parables, how did he use the multiple senses?
So he taught,
Hmm.
he said it, people heard.
Hmm.
He showed miracles, people saw it.
Okay.
And when we can see, when he distributed food, also 5,000 multiplication, people taste the food.
Yes. So they tasted the miracle. Yes.
Tasted the miracle.
Hmm.
They saw, they heard, they tasted.
Hmm.
And smell, I don't know.
When he ate the fish and the bread, they smelled the fish
Yeah,
and the bread.
we can say
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. When he was teaching the parables, how did he use the senses? What did Jesus do when he was teaching parables or he was teaching them? About faith. He did faith and courage. So faith.
Sister, you said that seeing you will not see and hearing you will not hear. That
No,
means
how did he, when he was teaching them, how did he help them to remember things? Through
He showed them, Pastor, like when he was teaching faith, a mustard seed.
Yes. He says, if you have faith as mustard seed, maybe he was there, and then you have faith to move the mountains, tell the mountain to go and fall in the sea. I'm sure the mountain was there and the sea was there. What else? He said, look at how the birds, they do not sow nor reap, or they don't even have a storeroom, but yet God feeds them. He says, look at the lilies of the field. I'm sure there were lilies there. So he says, look at the lilies of the field. Okay. So when, he says, when he talks about the parable of the sower, I'm sure they would have envisioned, or the fields is just there. He was just sitting and teaching them. The sower is sowing the seeds, the parable of the net or the big catch of fish. So all of these things were very familiar to them, something that they see, or they, when he's teaching them, they would have seen. Why do you think Jesus uses all of these practical things when teaching them?
It's very impactful
It impacts them. How did it impact? How does it impact them?
because they can see and they can feel that.
They can see, feel,
They are familiar with this, so they can relate.
they're familiar with it, so they can relate. After Jesus is gone, when they don't have the faith, they will look at the mountain and the mustard seed or the sea, and they're able to remember. Or when they are lacking their faith and trust in God, they can look at the birds and they remember what Jesus had spoke, right? Yes or no? When we look at people, when we look at situations, when we look at people, when we look at places, when we look at things, it always reminds us of the things of the past. Yes or no? Oh, this thing, this person gave us. I don't know how that person is. Or, I remember whenever I pass by, from going from, Bible college to office, I pass by a coffee shop and I remember something that happened years back in that coffee shop that really left me shaken, and I still remember that. So people, places, things always remind us, right? So it's very good to use things even when you're preaching and teaching. I know there is a preacher who brings objects and does object lessons to preach and teach, or to teach concepts that are difficult, so it will remain in people's mind. So even after many years, even if Jesus was not there, people would still have reminded themselves of what Jesus taught, because if they looked at all of those things. Okay. Also, we see that Jesus sat down at the well with a Samaritan woman. Okay. And what did he use to teach her? The truths. What did he use to teach her? Water. Yes. He used water, right? Was Jesus thirsty? Yes. Was a woman thirsty? Yes, that's why she comes to so you see how Jesus connected her felt needs to her spiritual needs. That is what we need to do when we are teaching children. We need to start from their felt needs. What they are feeling, what they are going through, and connect it to the spiritual truths. And that is what Jesus did with this woman, the Samaritan woman. Okay. So we see that, Jesus told her he could give her living water to satisfy her deep thirst. And she said, give me, because, I don't have to come back, to collect water here. Give me that living water. Okay. And we see that even when Jesus touched the eyes of the blind, they received sight, right? He could have just said, be healed. He touched them. Sometimes he's spat, sometimes he's put mud on their son, go wash in the pool of Siloam, So another example there. We also see Jesus washed his disciples' feet. It was a way of teaching them to, serve others. So we see that even Jesus used, multiple sensory techniques to teach people. Okay. Now, research indicates that each senses stores the information it receives in different places in the brain. Okay. So researchers have shown us that through your different senses, whether it's seeing, hear, touch, smell, taste, it is able to store information in different parts of your brain, receive and also store information in different places in the brain. So when we use teaching strategies, that involves more than one senses, what happens? Information is stored in more places in the brain, because each sense, your hearing stores in one place of the brain, your seeing stores in another place of your brain, your smell, your touch, your taste stores in different places. So when you're using all of these multi-sensory techniques, to teach children, you're actually storing the information in more parts of the brain. There's increase in the number of connections that is made in the brain, and children will actually recall what you have taught them much later on, because it is stored in multiple places in the brain. Okay. So we look at why is it important for us to use multiple sensory techniques to to teach children. Because there is increased connections. Now, when multiple senses are involved, more neural paths, you have neurons in your brain, neural paths are formed, and the neural paths in your brain are activated, because you're seeing, you're touching, you're tasting, you're smelling, you're hearing. Now, more of the neural paths in your brain is activated, and this creates a very strong connections, and it enhances the overall network information that you are receiving on a particular concept or a particular topic. And it is, you recall information more when you use multiple sensory techniques. Okay. It also enhances your memory, and you're able to recall. So when your information is stored in the multiple places in your brain, because you're using multiple sensory techniques, there is storage of this information in multiple places, and it is also, the memory becomes more strong, and it becomes easier to recall the information later. That is why when we were studying in school, my dad would always used to say, just don't read, but read and write. Read and write, and recall, and also imagine and think, just play it out in your mind. So when you do all of these things, what is happening? You're able to recall things much better and faster. Okay. And even later on, it also improves attention and engagement. So when you're using multiple sensory techniques, you're able to capture the attention of the learners. You're also able to maintain their attention throughout the time that you are teaching them. It creates a more immersive, and the children or the people you're teaching become more immersed in the teaching, because you're using so many things. And it also is more interactive learning. It's more engaging, because they're learning, seeing, tasting, doing things. It's more interactive, and it reduces the risk of boredom, and also people falling asleep, and also being distracted. Okay, because it is increasing the engagement. Also, when you use multi-sensory techniques, it different learning styles are accommodated. each one of us in this room, each one of us in this class, whether you're in person, online, e-learning student, we receive, we have different learning styles. Some of us, learn easier by just hearing. But for people like me, I have to learn and see, and then I can, and also do to recall the memory. For some people, it's just hearing. Some people, it is seeing and doing and hearing. Some people, it is hearing and doing. So we have different learning styles. We all have been created so uniquely, wonderfully, and differently. So, when we teach people using all of these senses, we're catering to their specific learning styles. And, that becomes easier for them to it allows the learners to access and process the information that they are receiving in ways that aligns to their strengths and what they are enjoying or what they like. Okay, so you'll understand all of this when I give you more examples. Now let us look at a different learning styles. So the first one is, which is a common learning style, most people do learn by hearing. Okay, so hearing is perhaps the most used common teaching technique or method. And how can we use learning, or how can we use hearing, or they're called as those who learn by hearing, they're called as auditory learners. Audio. Okay, they're called as auditory learners. So some of you can be auditory learners. So how can you help auditory learners to learn better when you're teaching children? If they are auditory learners, how could you help them learn better? What are some of the things that you can do or involve in your teaching? Stories. When you tell them stories, what should you do? Dramatize it, right? You can bring in music, you can bring in voice modulation, you can enact it, all of those things you can do, a lot of drama. Okay, so what else can you do? Narrating stories, even dramatically reading out stories. Okay, what else can you use for hearing?
Asking them questions of what they have
Yes,
learned.
ask questions, discussions, right?
Giving examples.
Giving examples, yes, real life examples, testimonies, good. Involve them, okay, by enacting, getting them to act. What else? What about videos? Even though they are watching, they are hearing, right? What about sound effects? Yes, okay. Even puppets, when you're using puppets, even though it is seeing, but you're using different sound, different ways of people speaking. Okay, what else? Quiz, yeah, games, all of those things. Okay, and you can just help them. Okay, so children who are auditory learners do well in projects where talking is involved. They love to talk. So for example, in your class, you might have children who are constantly asking questions and you get irritated with them. But what is their style of learning? Yeah, they want to hear their own voice. They want to question, they want to speak. Or you have some children who are constantly speaking to one another, right? Yeah, you know what she said happened, and they'll go on telling their neighbor, or they'll say, yes, ma'am, this happened, that happened. Why? Because they love to hear. They love to hear their voice. They love to hear speaking, different people speaking. And when you have discussions, time of discussions and debates, who are the people who are going to constantly be speaking? These children who learn by hearing. They love to speak. Okay, they love to say things. They'll want to be the ones who come and present things. Okay, so they actually do well in projects where talking about some things and learning, is part of their task. Okay, what is the other kind of learners? So auditory learners is hearing. Second one is seeing is what kind of learners? What is it called? Visual learners, yes. So learning by seeing is visual learners, not this. Visual learners, yes. So visual learners, benefit by looking at something. So they like to look at either words, so you can write words on the board, or sometimes, you can even show them pictures, you can show them, what else can you use for visuals? How can you teach visual learners?
We can prepare any dramas,
Okay, drama skit, what else?
puppets.
Puppets, projector, using PowerPoints, what else?
Bringing some objects.
Yeah, bringing some objects related to the story, very good.
By drawing something.
Yes, drawing on the board, right? If you're very good at drawing, as you're narrating the story, you can draw on the board, right? Like painting the picture for them. Okay, what else? What about
Reading
movies?
also, reading books.
uh, Reading, but you have to make it in a sense where they're able to visualize, right? Yes. What else? Cartoons, yes, those videos, um, pictures, flannel graphs. I don't know if you know what is flannel graphs. I'll show it to you. Where you have these pictures that are cut out figures, and they have a very soft material. And then when you're narrating it, you just put it on that board, which has like babies, a very soft cloth which they use to wrap babies around. That's called flannel material, and you can just narrate the picture. I'll bring a flannel board and picture and show it to you, and it's a beautiful way of narrating stories to children. Okay, also you can use object lessons, games, activities. I'll tell you what object lessons are all about. So for example, you're teaching them about the parable of the sower. So what we had done is bring a tray with with good soil, with just mud and rocks and thorns, and then just place just say the farmer went sowing his seeds, and he sowed, he threw his seeds and it fell along the wayside. So you're using that tray as a field where it has the wayside, which has the good soil, bad soil, rocks, thorns. So when he says he put the seed among the thorns, you put it among the thorns. So children are able to actually see it. And those who like to learn by doing, there can be ones who come and throw the seeds. Those who learn by touching, they can come and touch the thorns or the mud or the rocks. So you see, just when you're narrating a story about the parable of the sower, you're just using a tray with all of these things, but when you're telling them the story, they're actually visually being able to see it, and it can be a powerful learning method. Another powerful learning method we had used in our children's church was during just before Good Friday, we had done something for the children called as the different stations of the cross. Okay, different stations of the cross. So in a big room, we had different stations, different places arranged. And the first place we had was the Lord's Supper. So we had a small table that was placed down, and we had 12 plates and 12 cups, and we had put a little kind of mattresses and pillows, and so that was one station. And then we had the praetorium, where Jesus was taken and he was beaten by Pilate with a rod. And so we had a rod there, and we had actually made a crown of thorns. If you look at this bougainvillea tree outside our Bible college, you see thorns. One of the teachers made a crown of thorns, and so we had just kept it there. And then we had another station where we had just kept pots, nice green pots and everything, and we had just kept something like a, we made out of chart paper like a rock, and we had just kept pots over there. That was a Garden of Gethsemane. And another station was, you can do this even in your churches if you want. We had a cross. We had actually made a wooden cross, and we had kept two buckets. One bucket we had put red color, food color, in the water, so it was, totally dark red. Another bucket we had plain water, and we had some strips of paper and pens over there. So children would go through each station of the journey of the cross that Jesus went through. So we'll have few children come and sit at the Lord's Supper, and there'll be one teacher who tells them what happened during the Lord's Supper. So they're actually sitting like 12 disciples, and they're hearing. And they'll go to the next station where they talk about what happens when Jesus was in front of Pilate, how he was beaten with a rod, and they will actually touch the crown of thorns with their hands. And then they go to the next station, the Garden of Gethsemane, where there's another teacher who tells them what happened. So all of those spots and all is just the garden, this rock where Jesus knelt and he prayed, and then it was the cross. And then we tell them, you can write all of your sins on the strips of paper and put it in that red bucket. And Jesus says, washed away your sin, and look at that bucket there with clean water is how your life is now. And when children went through those different stations of the cross, many of them at the end of it, were left in tears. They were crying because it was a visual representation of what really happened, and it was so powerful. And I remember that many children gave their lives to Jesus. So there's something that you can also do in your churches, such a powerful representation when people really go through those things. And also, we had, somebody, I don't know who is that, one of the teachers on a wooden wooden plank had actually put big nails. So the nails were standing up, and the children were able to actually place their hands on the nail and just feel the little pain that happens when you just lightly put your hands on the crown of thorns or on those nails. We still have that, I think, in children's church. We just kept it so we can use it. So you see, all of these are powerful learning tools that, that when people really go through it, visualize it, it brings about profound, significance of what Jesus really went through. Okay. Another thing that I used when I was teaching children about the 10 plagues, which can be very boring. God sent this, and then, Pharaoh repented, and then Moses prayed, and God took it away. Then God sent the second plague. So, I found a website, you can put the next picture. You can see that picture of this finger puppets. So each of these puppets actually are talking about each plague. So what you can do is, they actually have this, you can print, it's printed out, so you can get it printed. And then they have, the puppet there, and beside that they have strips of paper. So you just fold a strip and then you staple it, and it becomes like a ring that you can put. So each time you're telling each plague, you can put it on your finger, or you can even give it to the children, and they're just enjoying the learning process. Otherwise it becomes so boring. So provide children with interesting things to watch and do, because learning becomes very interesting. Okay. The next thing is learning by, you finished? Hearing, seeing, learning by, okay, touch. We'll do touch first. Okay. So some children learn best when they are moving or touching. Have you seen children constantly fidgeting with pen, or they'll bring some toy, or, they will just be playing with their water bottle, or they will be playing with some, they'll bring a ball to class and come, and they'll just be playing with it, or they'll be rotating their pen like this, or they will be rotating and moving, and their leg will be here and their hand will be there. These children actually learn by moving and by touch. So, if you tell them sit quietly, find it very difficult. They will not learn. They will not listen to you, because they learn by moving and by touch. Okay. And so they're constantly fidgeting with things, with a pencil, pen, playing around. But you need to remember that they are even listening even as they doing it. Remember, I told you this example of this child in kindergarten in children's church. The mother is to be very sad because he would not just sit for 1 minute. He'll be running all around. Sometimes his head will be down and his leg will be on top, or he'll be jumping around from here to there. But actually, when he was in his doing all of those things, he's listening to the teacher, because one day she came back telling us that she had tears in her eyes, because when they were talking about something, he suddenly said, this is what my teacher said in. He says a statement, and then she said, how do you know that? And he said, my children's church teacher told me that. And it was not some simple statement, it was some profound truth that he said. And she was shocked, and she actually felt joy in her heart. And she said she had tears because she realized that her child is actually, in spite of running around and doing everything, was actually listening. I know of a colleague who told me that, she'll be teaching her child, but when she's teaching her child, she'll be, reading out the question and the answers, or teaching the lesson. But what the child will be doing? Her child head will be on the bed and his legs will be on the wall, but he'll be listening and he'll be answering the questions, because this child cannot just sit quiet. He has to learn by fidgeting and doing things, or he'll be rolling, or he'll be doing somersaults and all of those things. But she says that is the way he learns, and I have to be very patient, and I know he's listening to me, and I have to just teach him that way and put up with that, because that is not how I learn. See, I find it very difficult, she says. So children learn different ways. So when they're doing it, don't tell them, sit properly, stop playing with that pen, because then they will stop listening to you. So how do you think you can help children with this, with their learning style as touch? What can you basically do? You have to give them something to touch, right? Yes or no? Okay. So what can you do to teach them when you're telling the story? What can you give them to learn about the story from touch, from the sense of touch? Yes, you can bring some objects related to the story. So for example, you're teaching about creation, okay? Or you're teaching about Moses dividing the Red Sea. Or you're teaching about Noah and the flood. Or you're teaching about the Samaritan woman. What do you think you can give them in their hand? Creation, you can bring flowers, leaves. Yes, you can also see those who learn by smell. They will be smelling it. Yes, and there'll be others will be touching it.
So you can give them a rod.
A
Rod.
rod. Yes, you can give them for Noah's story a boat. Okay. Maybe you can just give them a bowl of water, or just put little water in their hand, right? What if you're talking about, Jesus' temptation, where Satan tempted him, saying, "Turn the stones into bread," or you're teaching about David and Goliath. He took 5 smooth stones to fight Goliath. What can you give them in their hands? Stones, yes. Okay. You're teaching about creation. You can give them grass and plants. Okay. Or you're teaching about Moses, how he was left in the river, in the boat. You can give them a boat. Or among the reeds, you can give them some grass, so they'll just feel the grass. When you're talking about the wise and the foolish builder, the parable of the wise and the foolish builder, what can you give them? Sand, yes. You're teaching about Jesus multiplying, the 5 bread and 2 fishes. What can you give them in their hand? Cookies, bread. Okay. You're teaching about Good Samaritan. What can you give them? Good Samaritan. Good Samaritan.
Can give them one patient.
Okay. So sorry. So sorry, Gertrude. Yeah. You can give them a sick child, okay? What can you give them?
Medicines.
Donkey. You can no donkey in the class, please. What can you give them? Bandage, Dettol, some band-aid, or you can give them some ointments, right? All of those things. Jesus' crucifixion, or you're talking about the parable of the sower, or Jesus' crucifixion, what can you give them? Rod, cross, thorns, stripes. How can you give stripes? You just can give them a rod. Yeah, touch. Parable of the sower. Parable of the sower, don't hit them and give them the stripes so they touch the stripes. What about the parable of the sower? Parable of the sower, you can give them seeds, rock, mud, all of those things, right? What about prodigal son? Or when you're talking about Achan's greed, Achan, he stole things from Jericho. Elisha's greedy servant Gehazi, prodigal son, what can you give them? Or what is common to all of these stories? Money, yes, coins in their hands, right? So see, simple things, but you can just give them and they will really appreciate you taking the initiative for doing that. Not all children will do like it, okay? So for some children who don't like by touch, they'll say, I don't want, don't give them. They only are good at, their sensory organs are learning and seeing, okay? But if those who want by touch, you can just give them. Whoever wants to touch it, you can give it to them. Okay. Now, what is the next learning style? Learn by smell. Okay, learning by smelling. An infant's, a newborn baby's first bond, how it bonds with his mother. How does it bond with his mother? How does it know this is his mother? A baby when it's born.
They smell the mother, they know.
Yes. There's a mother and a grandmother speaking, so they smell the mother. They know it's their mother through the sense of smell, right? So just imagine how powerful smell can be in creating memory hooks for children. When we are born and we are attached to our mother by through smell, imagine how powerful smell can be in creating memory hooks for learning Bible stories. But some of us think, oh, smell, what can we do? It's so hard. What can we bring to the class? Or how can we help children who learn by smell? What can we do in this lesson? Here are some easy ideas. Like Komal said, for creation, just bring them flowers. You can just see them smell. You see some people, when they get something, they're automatically smelling it because they learn by smell. Okay, that is how they connect. That's how they this are. Okay, so you can bring fresh flowers. You can give them to smell. Even when Jesus' betrayal or Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, you can even use flowers because it's a garden. Okay, when you're talking about Jesus' death, what can you give them in terms of smell? Okay, perfume that was used to his body. When Jesus was dying on the cross, what did they give him to drink?
Gall.
That is vinegar, right? So you can bring some vinegar, give them to smell. Okay, allow children to. What happened? What is? What did he say? Vinegar. Okay, allow children to smell vinegar, and you can tell them how the soldiers tried to give Jesus vinegar to drink to quench his thirst. What about the wise men who came to visit Jesus? What can you give them? Gift boxes, but smell. This is smell. Scented candles. Yes, scented candles. I remember last Christmas, last year when my sister, no, not 2025, 2024, when my sister visited, she got me she got me a, a shower gel that was frankincense and myrrh. You know, it's a shower gel, you know, to apply when you take when you take bath. It was mixed with frankincense and myrrh, and I used it during Christmas, and it actually made me feel like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, the smell of frankincense and myrrh, and this is what the wise men brought to baby Jesus, and I could really smell it at that time. And this time she bought frankincense and myrrh bath and body, you know, cream, you know, hand lotion. So that smell was like, okay, you know, this is how baby Jesus would have smelled. So it makes things really alive for us. So you can use fragrant candles. That woman showing her love for Jesus, what can you do? Use the woman showing her the alabaster jar.
Oil.
Yes, you can use perfumed oil, or you can even use perfumes. Okay, you can just bring it to class. Also, when you're talking about creation, you can give them different fruits and vegetables and flowers. They can just, you know, smell and try to guess. They can close their eyes and try to guess the object. That can make it as a game as well. Okay, Good Samaritan. First aid kit, yes. Medicines, get them to just smell all of those things, you know. Vitamins, yeah. Medicines, ointments, you know. Fruit of the Spirit,
Fruits.
fruits, yeah. You can get them to smell. The parable of the 10 virgins, oil,
Lamp and
yes,
oil.
oil, fragrant oil. When you're talking about sin, what can you use? Sin. You bring good perfume and tell them when you overcome sin. Okay, when you're talking about sin, what can you use? Yeah, something that smells bad, like a rotten, you know, fruit or a food or something like that. And, you know, or you can just bring something that is stinky thing, you know, and you keep it outside the class, and you can just say, go and, you know, get a whiff of the smell. You know, that is how, you know, that is how detestable sin is. And that is how we, you know, sin cannot be kept in the room. They're like this garbage bag. It's to be kept outside. It's thrown, you know, how stinky and smelly. That's how our lives become when we are living in sin. So you just see simple things and how you can teach them by smell. Okay. Coming to the last one. What is the last one? Learning by taste. Okay, we'll do that after the break. Any questions so far? Are you all able to understand? Are you able to understand what is your learning style? How many of you learn by taste and touch? You like to touch and taste and smell. How many of you? Anything you get, you just smell. Nobody? Smell? Your smell, huh? Or taste? Smell is also part of your learning style. Okay. Okay, we'll come back after the break and we'll continue. Thank you.